If you like our content about training, then you'll love our programming too. Head to the notes below to grab a free week of general physical preparation. You get unlimited access to me and fresh programming every single week for less than $1 a day.
Welcome to another episode of the High Performance Podcast. Matt Watson doing the three-peat. Is this third appearance? It could even be the fourth appearance. I mean, it should just be a monthly booking at this point.
I've got a feeling it's three.
But
yeah.
And then I've done one or two on yours. I'm here as always with my loyal co-host, Jacob Mosqueda. But the reason why we hit record with such urgency, Matt just sort of brought up that a mutual friend, Sam Likes Biomechanics, who was on the show this month actually, he sort of did a post the other night shitting on the concept of force absorption. It's a bit early in the morning though, so I can't even remember the contents of the post. I do remember discussing it with him on the show though. But sort of where we were sort of going with it is, anyone who understands physics knows that it's not force absorption. It's just a different form of force expression.
Yes.
With the function of decelerating you. It's like a slower application of it or something like that. Does it have any meaningful implications for the way we make coaching or training decisions? Or is it more just about having a coherent theoretical model? Like, I could see the value in that.
Yeah. I mean, I think people mean well by it. Like using the phrase absorption. I think where we may trip up is in like how the tissue is reacting to that. Like, do we assume that there's a different response from the tissue because we're trying to absorb force rather than apply force? Like, I think Sam put it really well. It's like, it's just a different strategy of when you're gonna. It's yielding versus overcoming force, right? This is it. You've got two ends of the spectrum, but nothing can be completely yielding when it comes to tissue in the human body. Otherwise, you just end up on the floor. So there is always an overcoming element to yielded movement. So yeah, the yielding phrase is similar to absorbing, but it really is just taking that tissue through length to a certain stage and then redirecting the center of mass or whatever it is to then be put wherever you want it to be. So, yeah.
It feels like the conversation, I guess that's physics as well, isn't it? How there's no such thing as cold. It's a lack of heat.
Yeah. You're getting fancy now.
But then I say things are cold. Like I said, I have respect and I want to have the conversation, but we have so many of these conversations in fitness, again, that I'm typically a part of. And I'm just like, when we're sitting there on a Sunday night or when I'm staring at some cunt flying through the air, how does it impact that? Some person, sorry. All right, anyway, let's do a bit of a catch up as well, because I always see you posting interesting shit on your story. I know you've been up to a bunch. I think you'd sort of been living in LA. Are we just coming up to the 12-month anniversary of that? Because I think last time we checked in, you're sort of just going through that settling in phase.
Yeah, it was, when was it? End of November was the year kind of crossover period. So this is our like first year of US-based like madness. It's been
election cycle year.
And now like our 5-year visa is now, 4 of it is now in a completely different Trump era. So it's going to be interesting. We get the whole Trump era again through our visa. So it's very interesting being an outsider and learning a little bit about.
Are you the type of immigrant that Trump would be concerned with? Stereotypes like that's it's okay if you don't want to get into it, but yeah, do you reckon that could change things then? I always forget that you can make all these plans to move to another country, and then I was almost going to call it a regime change. I don't know if that's the right term.
I mean,
you know what I mean? It's just like the political climate changes. Because I've been thinking about moving to Bali, and like, again, I see their election posters and I'm just like, I don't know if this guy likes personal trainers as much.
Sorry, that would be hard to tell.
Trump. He probably loves personal trainers.
Yeah. It's just interesting because, like, from a British standpoint, we assume that the politics align, but it's so different. Like, we assume that the left is the left and the right's right, but it's just not. So it's it's interesting and actually learning a little bit more about it and not having like a British perspective. You're actually like in it. So yeah, I don't know if it would change my business much. Maybe maybe my tips won't be taxed. I don't know.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying the episode. I just wanted to take a second to let you know that Angus has poured all of his knowledge on e-commerce and organic content into an ebook, which is now available. If you want to check it out, head to the show notes or the link in Angus's bio. Thanks.
Do you talk about politics ever? I never, other than in a joking way, I'll never enter like a gym or like a fitness relationship and be like, fucking, are you voting for so-and-so or whatever? But like, I'm surprised how often I'll find myself either at a seminar, in a work consult, or just fucking training someone. They're just like, let me give you my political fucking manifesto. Because I think like I'm absorbing most of my interactions and most of the content I can choose. It's all through social media, right? So I understand that's people's place to vent. But my impression of the US is that people are having a lot of political conversations in person. Or is it just because everyone who actually posts online is fucking insane and you can walk through the streets in America and not have a political conversation in election year?
I think it's very much more like that. And I think the polarizing states are obviously going to be places where it's going to feel a lot more like intense. But for me, I think it's now become like, it's not like you're a type of person, Angus, or you're a type of person, Jacob, and this is what I like to do. This is what I believe. It's like, this is my political stance and this is who I am as a person. And you're like, you can also just be a human and be like, most of this is absolute horseshit. And there's a few things that I like and most of the other stuff I don't really disagree with, but we got to vote somewhere in a two-party country. So yeah, that's how people kind of sit now. It's not like, oh, I'm Matt and I'm a fucking ex-high jumper. It's no, I'm Matt and I'm a left or right, or I don't know. So I tend to avoid many conversations outside of myself and my wife or very close people to me. So
you're just like, well, let's just talk about Trump or Biden's tendon capacity instead.
Exactly. I don't think Biden's have gone, mate.
Trump's probably on some new sort of steroid that specifically targets the tendons. He can probably still dunk behind the scenes or something like that. I mean, he's got a pretty good... Golf is one of those sports that we stereotype as in like, the demands of it, the body seems to be able to tolerate well into the 80s, but he's playing good. He's playing good. And that challenges a lot of what I know about ribcage rotation.
Yeah, he's so wide. Jeez. Yeah.
You think Elon Musk has got some rotation? I mean, if you see Trump actually hit a golf ball, I mean, he's got pretty poor backs. Like, there's not a lot of rotation, so it's pretty short game.
So it's just power. You're right.
It's just
No, to be fair, I have seen him swing a golf club, and I guess he does sort of do it like a wide ISA. I don't think Elon Musk could do it. He's got ribcage. He would. I reckon if one person saw him with the shirt off, he'd faint.
One interesting alien, I reckon he looks like the type of human that was like a group of aliens got together and like, what do these humans look like? We need to put one on planet Earth to like shake shit up. And they've imagined
like he snuck onto Earth.
And they've like, that's about right for a torso.
Okay, one more America-related question before we get into some plyo and maybe even some business chat. What's the drone situation? Have you seen the drones? What do you think the drones are? Are you curious about that? Or are you just like, I just want to focus on plyos, aliens, go away, please?
You know what? I haven't, it's one of those things you're like, it's either going to go away in the main news and media and people on social media are going to continue to speak about it and it'll be classed as like conspiracy, or it's being taken out of the mainstream media because there's actually something going on. So like there's this like conversation, like, is it one or the other? But also apparently New Jersey is the highest rate of UFO sightings in America. Like New Jersey itself, apparently as a place. I remember, I think it was Joey Diaz, the comedian, spoke about it because he's from New Jersey. And he was telling Joe Rogan about it or something like that. And he was like, fuck off. And he was like, genuinely, like the statistics for sightings are huge. And there's this very like old school wives' tale sorts of like UFO landings in the middle of New Jersey. And if you know what New Jersey's like, it's like one of the most populous states in America. So like,
so high population density. Obviously, we're increasing our incidence. Urban area, we're going to see increases in light pollution. I also wonder if there's a correlation. Things over the ocean, maybe we get light refracting in a different way. I've seen some things out over the ocean. Mainly seems like 2 times a year, the moon will rise out of the ocean midway through the night, but I haven't seen any UFOs. I would have thought Australia would be rife for that shit.
Yeah, because it's kind of like the drop off at the end of the world sort of thing in certain spots where the sun rises and drops and stuff. It's funny because I've thought about that so many times. We've gone down to watch a sunset down here, and there's so many surfers still out, and like so many of them surf until it is genuinely pitch black. But it looks so cool to be sat out there, and you think there must be some things you're like, what's that over there?
No, so the sharks definitely get more active at dusk and dawn, but the thing is people just start going in, so like that's when you get just the place to yourself. So like that has happened to me a few times this year. Where I just try not to think about it or anything like that. The other reason Australia is good for the aliens as an entry point, I think, is there's just less guns here.
True.
I mean, if you were going to pick like a softer entry point, touchdown in the middle of the desert, I just feel like that's
a lot out there. There's a lot of space out there for them to do what the fuck they like, right?
Yeah. I mean, they could be doing shit out there for like 12 months and our government probably wouldn't even pick up on it.
No. But I mean, it's going to, right, the whole like UFO stuff is going to blow up because of like Amazon drones now. People are going to be like, all that sort of like home deliveries by drones. People are going to be losing their minds in certain places. Like, what the fuck is this coming down?
Well, is there any part of you, give me a percentage, what percentage of you actually thinks it's aliens versus Amazon delivery drones or some shit like that?
Is that actually there in America, those drones?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Oh yeah. It's over. Like, it's like Georgia. It's like 1984, like George Orwell's. It's all coming down. They're going to have security cameras and it's the end of the world.
They got those self-driving Ubers as well. Yeah, it's getting crazy.
So percentage-wise, about 7%, I reckon. Guys, I don't think
so you're pretty on the fucking, some people have just got together like the local drone club or something like that.
Yeah, definitely. There's something going on. They're fucking with people.
Someone bought the shit from the, what Olympic ceremony was it when they used all the fucking drones? Anyway, fucking getting off topic. Jacob, shoot your weekly question.
Yes, my weekly question, my privilege. All right. So I think coming onto the scene, S&C scene, saw a lot of stuff around jumping, counter movement jumps, box jumps. Like this is performance. Wanted to ask, coming into it and bringing up plyos, is why should people start to get away from that mindset of box jumps, counter movement jumps, very non-moving jumps, and why should they start looking into plyos instead for performance?
Yeah. I think there's a lot of movements in our sport and in our field that are like expression-based movements, and we don't do enough that are more deflection and self-organization-based movements. And that for me is my version of locomotive plyometrics. It is getting as good as you possibly can to organize your body in space, handle speed and velocity. And to be honest with you, I'm at a point where I don't really care like what is termed per se a plyometric, as long as there is a landing and a takeoff based movement to it. I'm kind of like, whatever. I feel like there's a lot of development to be had in deeper landings, in faster landings, and in changes of direction or whatever. So I think we fall in love with expressions of movement. And I find that expressions of movement, so things like a box jump, I think they become more test-like than they actually become adaptationally focused. Like I'm not, if we're to, especially someone that's already, a reasonable athlete, if you're giving them like box jumps or counter movement jumps, how much are you shifting things? Are you
body weight clean and jerk?
Exactly right. It very much is that. So it's about, so that side of it is kind of sits over there and it's expression of movement. And like, I'm not saying that I don't do it, but it's a very small part of the puzzle. And for me, it's more about interacting with the ground at velocity and understanding how to organize your body well enough, whether that is, so like a lot of people might have the soft tissue in their lower legs to deal with fast speed landings, but they might have the upper, like the torso control and postural capacity that is, 20% lower than that. So there's a lot to be said in organizing your body in space and being able to deflect off the ground and continue locomoting, because you see it straight away that you have athletes that look more expression based. It's all push, push, push constantly. And as soon as they get themselves in a certain hole, or they have to deflect off the ground at a really fast velocity, they melt. They lose everything with regards to how good they are at expressing force. And sport really isn't about always expressing force. It's the flip opposite. It's actually dealing with forces and being able to redirect it. So that's kind of how I shift a lot of people's thinking with regards to plyometrics. And I think that actually you'd be better off spending time doing Olympic lifts. You'd be better off spending time even doing weighted jumps. Like, fuck. Just do something.
Wow, that was a diss.
I mean, do you know what? I found
No, I know it's okay. It's just the way it came out. It's
recently.
funny.
But like it serves so much more purpose, and actually we'll tend to go to, like, I've got a bobslayer at the moment, and we use weighted jumps as a method to push him into being able to express his center of mass better. And then we return to like a box jump, or we return to like a counter movement jump, and he's like, holy shit, I can really express my body now. I could never do it.
Also, the weight is sort of adding,
That's a
pushing
really
him into line.
interesting point. Yeah, the same way that we use it in a squat, just to help.
Yeah.
It's for the control of the center of mass, not because it's the best position to load necessarily, but I can see with the counterbalance and weight in your hands, you have so much more control over where the center of mass comes to.
Is that also where the med balls come into it as well? Because that's probably my next question there. Yeah.
Holy shit, because I was just thinking about how much I suck at touching down in relation to my center of mass to maintain momentum. And I'm like, is little hand weights going to give me just open up a little bit of regression there? I mean, just doing it.
There's something to be said, when you do like you can do like a movement like something where you find your midfoot really well, and you're like, right, I found my kind of like midfoot position, something, and I'm going to drive through it really effectively. And you're like, holy shit, that like lights up my glute, or I feel my hamstring a lot more, like a kickstand RDL. When you find your midfoot and you're like, I'm going to drive through that really effectively. Weighted jumps, I think, are a great example of like, where do I find my center of mass a bit better, and where can I drive through that but still express it like a similar velocity.
And slowing it down.
Yeah,
because coming from a weight room background, I feel like with sprinting and with plyos, you get ready to do it, and then you're ready to react to it, but then it's over before I've even mentally or cognitively interacted with the ground. I felt my feet hit it, but my brain didn't connect. And I know that it's like we're trying to push things to the back of the brain and help probably even further down the spinal cord. It doesn't have time to reach your brain, but I can see how holding weight just keeps you on the ground a little bit longer and just creates that familiarity.
Exactly.
And the connection.
Exactly. So I will surf a lot of that, like different weights until I get to a point where I will tease to a certain degree. And I'm like, things really fall apart if we just measure the metrics of like a jump height. So like,
keep it qualitative.
So you've got like the data, and then you've also got like what it looks like, and you can straight away, and the athlete tells you that felt totally different. There's like a crossover where you kind of fall off a cliff with regards to still being able to express things in a certain way. So, and that
are you talking about slowly adding the load here, like
it's either adding load or then decreasing load.
Okay.
And for me as well,
very much titrating in either direction. Like, exactly. Having a gradient to it.
So depending on what you want, whether you want it to be faster or whether you want it to be heavier loaded, then I think it's about like, where is there gradual incrementation of like jump height decreasing, or whatever it might be. And
is there a take? Fuck contrast. It's actually no. Like, we want gradient, and again, different things like French contrast, fucking peaking protocol, or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's not a post-activation potentiation thing. But again, just with this whole idea of doing loaded then unloaded movement, because And it's interesting because they're still calling it contrast sprinting, but I've noticed, who is it? Ralph Oman or whatever. I saw Michael Dango. He's a fan of the protocol. I know a lot of other Aussie coaches are running it right now where it's like super heavy acceleration and then just pulling back the weight, pulling back the weight, pulling back the weight, and eventually doing it unresisted. I guess to be fair, it's still pretty, it's not contrast because it's not like it's like super loaded to unloaded. I feel like they sort of just do heavy, moderate, and then maybe unloaded, or maybe there's one more weight reduction, but I can sort of see how.
Again, another example is I'm using with the bobsleigh at the moment. We do like super maximal sled loads where we put on like, it could be something like 90% of his body weight and he moves over 5 meters and I'm like, push the shit out of this or sled the hell out of this. You know, you've got to be, you almost need to be slow, but there's still the speed of intent there. And then it's an incremental drop in those weights. Then we go to like a reasonable load and then it's like a super light load and then we unweight it. And there's something definitely nice about, I think the like contrasting movement should be contrasted that is very close to that expression of force and redirection of momentum, whether it's, you know, hitting the ground, accelerating, whether it's sprinting. Don't
trap bar deadlift into leap, like just loaded leap into
loaded leap. Yeah, that's exactly. Better. And the beauty of so what people also completely disregard is that even if I put 5 kilo dumbbells in my hand, the thing that actually is truly changing is probably not using your arms in that jump. So if we go from like, let's say a counter movement jump, velocity up and down, you've got contribution up to like 15% of overall output with your arms. So,
you've changed body weight by probably 7% on the average. 5% if it's a 100 kilo person. Yeah, wow.
Exactly. So you're then taking away the expression of force through actually just holding something. It could be just hands on your hips. That's why we use the med ball. Like I'll change just ever so slightly, maybe outside your center of mass. So there's a few things that are maybe locked in nicely.
It's just a different fucking world, plyos. Because and then again, I know that I've known that for a while now, but I know it more deeply anytime I really have a good intensive plyo session. Because a lot of mine I am just doing sort of a smaller dose. But whenever I do a full one, or whenever I sit down and have a good 1 hour chat with Matt Watson, I'm like, fuck, this is just an endlessly deep rabbit hole where like I feel like I don't even know what questions to ask until I stumble down it further myself.
If you want access to a community of like-minded coaches, head to the notes below and join our free school community. I'm in there every week doing Q&As and there's plenty of educational content on the way as well.
Yeah. So practically speaking, as an example, you see an athlete, they're way too toey in their leaps or in their moving leaps. So you would add a weight and then as soon as you start to see, okay, they're starting to hit the midfoot a bit better, and then would you go more, or then you'd go, okay, we'll turn it back until we get unweighted? Is that what it is?
If the aim is to get back to the plyo, like it is a soul, almost like teaching process, then I'll either do something like that, like I can use a med ball, and a med ball is beautiful, right? A med ball becomes here's a 5K plate and drop into a deep squat. I can place the med ball out in front of me and sit onto my heel.
It's the heels elevated squat, yeah.
It's the heels elevated squat. I can do that, or I can actually make them do more of a deep tier form, like way of doing it. And whether it's deep, like to the degree that we ask for in deep tier landings, or whether it's just a little deeper than what we expect in more stiffer movements, I don't care. That there's no, I'm
it's
like,
just the slowing down of it.
It's just slow it down. Okay. It's feeling the gait cycle more through that foot so that we can express force where we want it to be expressed, and then figuring out how we can reduce that time in which you express that force. And I think there's definitely been something in the way that we teach like a pogo leap, the traditional way of like, it's like locking out your knees and then just trying to stub your toes into the ground.
Yeah.
We've lost a lot of quality from how we use the whole foot. And
also just the worst, most unintuitive way to fucking leap repeatedly. Yeah. God, we fuck with a lot of things.
We do. We like to fuck with it. And we, unfortunately, the more dynamic things get, the more that we can fuck with it. And that, unfortunately, because so many people move in so many different ways. And when people tell you that there's so many different ways for someone to back squat, and I'm like, there's like 3, bro. Like, come on. There's like 43 different ways to leap. And so you have to solve a lot more of those problems.
Wow. Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of the be all and end all for me, is being able to get someone to express force in the way that they would like to express it in the most maximal form possible. Where things fuck up is where we try to decrease the time in which we do it, and we try to add velocity to the thing that's happening. So that's why it's another reason why there might be an argument against contrasting things so far away from each other. Like, it's okay to just turn down the heat 5%, or add an external stimulus like a little dumbbell in your hand or a med ball, and you'll see a slight change in things, but it's not dramatically changing things so much to. That's why plyometric progression continuums are horseshit, because they are so far from the thing that we could just be a little bit closer to
context.
the thing. Yeah. And it's polarizing. It's learning how to land and take off in one movement.
When are people going to accept that progression in S&C comes from getting better at a task, not changing to a different fucking task? It's this thing. They do it in strength training in S&C. I was ignorant to it because, again, strength sports background. And I was like, surely in S&C, they just know it's about like actually getting fucking stronger. And then you'll see like Science for Sport be like, so we do a fucking front squat, and then we do a leg press, and then we do a fucking hack squat, and then we do this front foot elevated split squat. I'm like, this is entertainment. This is not a fucking progression, man. Like, sorry, I called out, I associated a name. It's not just them. It's like 99% of S&C. I'm like, where the fuck did this, what the fuck is this? And I think it comes from this other conversation that people say, they're like, well, it's not all about strength. I'm like, but that doesn't mean we just do shit strength training. Because this is what the surfing S&C coaches do as well. They're like, well, a fucking surfer doesn't need to squat 2 times body weight. And I'm like, I fucking know, because I do that and I surf. But I'm like, so what? You're just gonna, like, yeah. I don't want to go on a full rant about this, but they're like, so they'll be like, so if a surfer only needs to, in theory, say their strength thing is like maxed out at like a 1.5 times body weight squat, I'll make your squat training so shit that it takes 10 years to get there. Rather than just being like, I could get this kid a lifetime's worth of bone density and leg strength for surfing in like 8 weeks of resistance training. Anyway,
just get on the fucking K-box and produce force. Like, I genuinely don't care.
Here's a better one. Don't lift weights.
Yeah.
As a surfer, like, whatever, like, it's all secondary health benefits. I'm going to do my full assault on surfing S&C this year, because I avoided it because I tried to start a surfing S&C brand. And then I was kind of like, wait, I'm an absolute fucking beast. And like, this hasn't done shit for my surfing outside of secondary health benefits. I can't do this. But then I just watched it emerge around me. All these cunts being like, all right, little Johnny, I know you want to go out surfing, but we got to do your breath work and your fucking shithouse exercises with lots of thoracic rotations to work on your some specific component of your surfing. And, you know, and this is, sorry, we'll get back to general training in a second, because, you know, the one thing I have found that could actually impact high performance surfing, it's you. You're actually the secret. Actually, fuck, I've got to get you teed up with. I got to somehow make a connection with you and the Colapinto boys and that, because from an injury prevention and a load management perspective, what I think some of the most catastrophic injuries we see in elite surfing that keep surfers out of the ocean for the longest, it's when they blow out their ankle or their knee landing a huge air, because you have this landing where it's not only the height of the air or the wave that you're landing on. Sometimes the ocean will explode beneath you, so you get this really chaotic and intense landing out of nowhere. But then it's coupled by this, I can't just be like, you know how you can set a high jump bar, and that's a form of load management and prepping yourself for a competition. So sometimes the ocean goes flat for 2 weeks, or sometimes it's just conditions where you're not going to do a lot of big airs or something like that. And then you get that out of nowhere. So I feel like we can use S&C in surfing and particularly plyometric training to maintain a dose that then all of a sudden we're actually in control of. And this comes down to like, how much can you really control load at the end of the day? We sort of spent so long talking about how there's all these factors that you can't control. But yeah, I'm like, is that the one pathway? But it's fucking crazy that you can look at every aspect of S&C improving performance. And like, that's where you land. If you shit at surfing, there's a lot I can do for you. Actually, not really. It's just teaching you how to fucking swim so you can catch a wave. But yeah, ironically, plyos are the only thing that's actually going to impact high performance.
Keep you out there. It's interesting. And and like you say, like how much can you can control of, how much that's going to happen, how much, how high you're going to fall from, the impact. General preparedness is just a fantastic thing. Like, just be fucking prepared for something, brother. Like, it's going to come up. There's nothing better than hearing.
I can't go in there with that as my one pitch and be like, all right, Jack Robinson, you got to train with me. Not because I'll get you stronger or better at surfing, just because everyone else fucking sucks. But I will try to control your dose of plyo so you don't blow out your knee again. But then if you did blow out his knee, I would literally just have to like book a flight home and be like, oh, whoops. Like.
Hey, you know what? You know what's really interesting here, surfing wise, is skimboarding. So down in Laguna Beach, which is about 10 minutes from us, that's where it was invented, a place called Aliso Beach. Oh, wow. And the best guys in the world skimboard there. Like X amount world champ. I'll go down there sometimes, bro, and they are nuts. And like I look at it, and these guys, because the beach that they skimboard on, it's like super banked in, and the waves break super early. So it's like the perfect beach for it. Or super late, sorry. So it's literally like nothing, and then you just see
deep water right up until the shore, and then the shore almost rises up like
it's like whipping it up. Yeah. So these guys are running downhill and then jumping onto a board that they have to, control, deal with a landing force, and then take into coming in. And I was like, these guys have got to be like, the difference in preparedness for being able to handle that. Like, it's non-stop running downhill. So like their eccentric strength, although it's in sand sometimes it's solid sand, and the sand's like really quite stiff. And it's interesting to look at that in comparison to just standard surfing.
Barefoot sprinting downhill.
Barefoot sprinting downhill, exactly. And they are running. These boys are running hard because they've got like such a little chance to catch these things. They're not like looking at them. They're like, oh shit, there's literally one like 20 feet about to pop up. So they'll just cane down the hill and then rip into this thing. So I've had those thoughts for that, especially.
How far are you away from Newport Beach?
Oh, literally 20 minutes.
Have you gone and watched a wedge session? You got to go stare at the wedge at Newport one day near the boat harbour.
There was a big one. So we had a massive surf this time last year. It was like around like New Year's Day sort of time. It was huge. It was huge. Some of the waves looked like they were like 30, 40 feet. It was nuts. I watched a couple of YouTube streams of it, and it's funny seeing like how many people then just go, fuck, we all get to the wedge. So that's cool.
Sorry for the lack of good segue here, but it is a good question that's going to be much more relevant to listeners. It was recently drawn to my attention that a lot, in an approach jump to dunk. That's this one example of an approach jump, I guess, because there's so many different kinds. Sam Likes Biomechanics was saying that people don't actually run in anywhere close to their max velocity. Well, obviously, you're not approaching from 60 fucking meters, but you know what I mean? Like, you're not accelerating as hard as possible. But in high jump, I mean, you're running on a curve, but were you able to approach as high a velocity as possible? Or were you sort of chilling? Like, explain that to me. One other thing though, because obviously the faster the better, right? Because I know that this isn't high jump, but Mondo, he just runs faster than everyone. Sorry, I'm being reductionist here, but I know one of the big things that separates Mondo Duplantis from all the other losers who can't jump over 6 meters at will is their approach velocity. And we saw what he did to Warholm, just left him out to dry.
Yeah, Mondo's running close to 10 meters a second on the approach. So that says a lot.
Shit.
That's fast.
I think it might even be more. I think it might.
There you go.
I think it was like 36 Ks an hour.
I can see it. So here's a kind of a cool statistic. I could hazard a guess to say that there's probably no one that's high jumped over 2 meters 40 without running 8 meters a second. So straight
on the approach, or
on the approach.
So that's the minimum. Oh, okay.
How long's your approach? And it's on a curve.
Yeah. So the approach will start straight for most guys. Well, for 99.9% of people, there's a couple of people that run a consistent curve, but the approaches will range between seven strides. But I say 7 strides is your markers at 7 strides, but guys will run in to then put their foot and then run 7 strides. They put their foot down on their marker and then do 7 strides, or it's at 9 strides, or it's a standing start at 11 strides, if that makes sense. So everyone's kind of starting at the same sort of place. It's probably about 25 meter from where they start to the bar, maybe 20 meters for some people.
You got to be accelerating.
Oh, you have to.
Sorry, I think the other thing is as well, like I forget how long we accelerate for, but then it really is, people probably accelerate like 90% plus in that first phase.
In that first like 5 strides, you have built what's close. I mean, like even Olympic sprinters, they have built most of their speed in such a short amount of time. Like the
first 3 steps.
Yeah, genuinely. Like
I guess in theory, or sorry, not even in theory, in practice, the first step. Fuck, it's such a head.
Yeah, carries so much velocity. So yeah, high jump is the fastest guys, or the guys that can handle the fastest speeds are the guys that jump the highest. And
what about long jump?
Oh, long jump is the guys that run the fastest, pretty much always guaranteed.
They're not even jumpers.
Look at the world record. The world record holders. Mike Powell, Carl Lewis is close behind him, and he's jumping close to 9 meters because he ran sub 10 in the 100. So like my coach always used to say this to me. He's like, we do speed training for high jump because you don't have to be, it's not necessarily that you have to run 100% at a bar. So let's say that you're running at 80%. If my 80% is faster than your 80%, then I'm going to win every day.
Raise the ceiling.
Yeah, I don't want to be thinking, shit, if I need to jump 240, I need to run at 8 meters a second. So therefore, I'm going to run 8 meters a second. You're like, no, because that's 95% of your max velocity. And
you don't want it to be that high intensity.
That's not conducive to running around a curve, setting up a takeoff, thinking about where you are with regards to a bar, where you're going to rotate in the air. You can't think of that. You need to
be this mindless 8 meters a second.
So the velocity needs to be dropped down to a point where you're in control of everything, because you have to orientate your body into a position where you can put your foot down at the right point. And we're talking points kind of as, 20 to 25 centimeters wide in a circle. If it's anywhere outside there, your trajectory is completely wrong over the bar. So your high point is either behind the bar or too far in front of the bar, and you're just going to knock the bar off. So your precision, same with a long jump. You've got to put your foot on a board running at 11 meters a second. Your precision has to be fantastic. So it is critical that it can't be max speed. It has to be controlled speed. And high jump is the most controlled speed because we have rotation there.
Just quickly as well, I want to make a point to everyone, because a lot of people ask me, they're like, Angus, why are you such a pig for watching and paying attention to so many different sports? Because I'm into so many sports where people are like, how the fuck are you watching that? And so many of the times it's just because I will have had a conversation with someone who's passionate about the sport, and they see so many things in it that you're just completely oblivious to. And there's so much magic in it. So if anyone who's listening, if there's ever a sport where you're like, yeah, that's a popular sport and a lot of people try really hard at it and dedicate their lives to it, but I just can't really see what the fuck's going on and what's so interesting about it. It's like, watch the sport with someone who's actually a fan of it, who actually knows it. Like, because I can imagine sitting down and watching the Olympic high jump session with you. All of a sudden, it would just be my favorite event. Or again, I get that out of the weightlifting, because again, it's so much. When I see them approaching the lift, I'm thinking about all their training lifts I saw that they posted on Instagram. I'm reconstructing what the training cycle might have looked like in my head, what the coach has sort of been telling them to focus on. And because I know that there's a lot of precision in high jump, but again, I'm like, run fast and then jump really hard, but never really thinking about so much of that jump trajectory is dictated by that touchdown point. And that is the golf aspect to the high jump, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah,
that's it. You can have your biggest jump and fucking fire it in the wrong direction.
Yeah, you can. Your high point can be in front of the bar, and you come down. So, like, if the bar's here and your high point's here, you're going to come down on the bar. If your high point's behind it, you're going to blow through the bar. So, yeah, and you got to think like rotationally. So I've got to get my foot. So my foot's being placed down, and my body is orientating towards the back other side of the pit, and then I have to turn myself, rotationally. So from a left foot jumper, I rotate to the left to get my back to the bar. So there's probably, I don't know, what would you call that? It's like maybe you're like 70 degrees from being horizontal with or straight on with the bar. So I've got to rotate myself all the way around to get into the right position. So again, there's so many precision elements to it. So it's very different as a sport. And you know what's really cool to watch is to watch Dick Fosbury. So Dick Fosbury, the guy that created the Fosbury flop, he was someone that, again, like my coach Eric said, that like old school wise, he would watch it on an old school tape. So in like a projecting tape, you'd put the big tape on it, and Fosbury would, and he just said, I've replayed it. He replayed Fosbury's winning jump at Mexico 68 so many times that it wore it out and you couldn't see Fosbury jumping anymore. And if you actually watch his jump, it is like he stands still and he just goes from a standing start and runs 9 or 11 strides, but he just runs hard. He's like boom, 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 and puts his foot down and gets this rotation, which is insane. And it's been cool to then see like the evolution of like you got different types of jumpers. So you might get guys that are like far more like
with the scissor crew. Were they approaching with a lot of momentum, and Dick just hadn't had a chance to work it out yet, or would you say that the scissoring it is all in on speed so much? Like it's just...
so you've got the straddle. So the straddle is you're coming in at like a completely different angle. It's almost straight onto the bar.
Do we not say scissor anymore?
Scissors is a different technique. So people were scissoring.
I thought it was like the implication,
but the technique that kind of took high jump to like 2 meters 35 was the straddle. So they come in and they put their leg down and they swing their free leg up and then rotate over the bar on their front. So you have to watch it if you've not seen someone straddle jump.
Oh, I don't think. Okay. I think I'm constructing it in my head because I definitely know what the scissor is. I definitely know what the flop is. Yeah. So what did scissor get us above 220, or are we talking 2 teens?
No, I think scissor probably back in the day was something that took us to maybe 205. People have jumped to, so Barshim, the Olympic champion, is scissored 216, and I believe that's potentially a world record. So the scissor probably took us to around 2 meters until people figured out the straddle.
Was the straddle relatively more impactful? Obviously made redundant because even if the flop was like 2% better, it's still going to be universally adopted. But so the straddle was the thing that, in terms of the pure centimeters on the bar, made the biggest difference. Fosbury a little bit overrated then in my mind. Obviously, he's the king of the game.
Well, you know what? You actually think about it, it kind of is like that, because I think, I would say the difference between it is probably like 20 centimeters from the scissoring crew to the straddle crew, but then only 10 centimeters from the world record in the straddle to the world record in the flop. So
who was it? Straddle Sally or fucking who do you know? Do we know their name?
There's a young Russian jumper who was called, is it something like Yuroshenko? Yeah. It's Yuroshenko. It's something like that. And so the whole story behind it is that Fosbury couldn't straddle. Straddle was a lot more force and slower dominant athlete. I say slower, it's still fast.
Okay.
But it's a long swinging free leg. Fosbury didn't like to do that. He could genuinely jump like 1 meter 80 with a straddle.
We value your input here at the High Performance Podcast. Head to the SpeakPipe link in the notes below and you can leave us a voicemail where you can ask us a question or leave us a topic for us to explore on the show. We hope to hear from you soon.
So he was quite bad with the adopted technique of the straddle.
Yeah, he couldn't straddle for shit. He started playing around with, he was like, I just like to be able to run off of this. That's what's beautiful about the flop, is that you don't really lose speed. You just continue to run off of it. yeah, he just adopted this. I think other people had played with like running a curve anyway, but not like completely rotating like Fosbury had. So I think that's where he won it with speed jumpers. We started to understand that we could take a lot more speed into a Fosbury flop than we could do in the straddle. Now the straddlers were obviously moving fast, but it's very strength dominant. It's such a long pull through it. So yeah, those were the shifts in the high jump. But like you said, Angus, it's like if you've never seen it, like going to see something like that live will change your perspective on sport. I've been to world-class athletics. I went to the World Championships in 2017, and I had 2 tickets. I had one for the decathlon and the men's high jump qualification. And genuinely, I saw them hurdle in front of me. Then I saw them. It might have been different events actually. No, I think actually that was just the men's hurdle. We saw them long jump. I saw javelin being thrown as well in the stadium at the same time. Guys were throwing like 85 meters in the javelin. And then I watched guys high jump 2 meters 30. And then I watched the high jump final. And whilst the guys are doing the high jump final, you've got like relays going around and you've got sprints going off.
Sensory overload, being in the stadium on a big day of track and field going off together. I was lucky enough to experience in 2018 at the Com Games. I know you've had a lot more exposure to seeing elite track and field in real life, but I second that to anyone who's listening. If you have the opportunity to go to a world level event and you haven't been in the same room as it before, it's a bit overwhelming.
It's humbling. So good. So like everyone's like watching a race, right? The hurdles go and you're like, oh, that was amazing. Crowd dies down, and then you see this big clap of a long jumper on the runway, and you're like, fuck, here we go. This guy, he's come back on the long, and then like a fucking spear goes overhead, and it's just like constantly like, and if you want something even better, is do it indoors. If they're like Australia, is probably not much indoor.
We don't get it really.
But European, it's fantastic because you're like 20 feet from people. Like the whole stadium is so close to you. So that sensory overload times 10, man. It's fucking brilliant.
Hate the 200 meter track, bugs me out.
Yeah,
but wild. Yes, I understand what you're saying. But yeah, 200 meter indoor track is fucking can't handle those centrifugal forces.
Yeah.
Everyone seems to have this fetish for volleyball style jumping. If you want to learn a dunk, I don't know what and again, I was meant to Google it. I'm sure if I Googled it, I would have fucking worked out.
Did you get like 10 comments under your dunk post about that?
More than that, I've even had conversations on the podcast about it. I think someone recommended it, and I've been meaning to. I just had a lot going on. So, do you know what this is? What's the go with volleyball jumping? Why are they so good at it? What's the volleyball technique? Or is this news to you, Matt Watson?
No. Volleyball players have always been great 2-foot jumpers.
There's no 1-foot jumping in volleyball, is there?
No, because you don't want forward trajectory because there's a freaking net
purely vertical.
You want to go straight up. So like if I'm spiking the ball, I've got like 3 strides into it or 4 strides into it. So I'm like 1, 2, 3, 4, boom, and I have to stop on a dime and go straight up. So I'm like my over rotation of like that trajectory is actually over rotation of me then hitting overhead rather than
you would take down the net.
Yeah, because you touch the net, you lose the point. So it's I think volleyball. What's really good with volleyball is it's like dunking without a basketball, but someone's throwing you an alley-oop all the time. So it's like, here you go, I'm going to throw this ball into a perfect position for you every time. And volleyball has learned really effectively how to organize their body so that they can rotate into the right position in the air to then strike at the top of the arc of their jump.
So it's more that. It's more the context almost than the specific technique.
Yeah, I think, and it's the best way to learn how to dunk, Angus. It's so hard to dunk with a ball in your hand. Like, it is a completely different thing. If someone throws you an alley and it's just in front of the rim, you're like, cool, I can get into the right position, boom, take off, boom, and dunk.
Apart from the skill perspective of the actual dunk itself, does it got to do anything with your rotation of your body and how it's sort of fucks it up with the jump height or no?
Absolutely. So what a lot of people will get wrong is that, let's say you're a right foot dunker and a right-handed dunker, and you're taking off your left side. What you'll find yourself trying to do is taking the ball from your left hip to rise it up to above your right shoulder. That's like a natural mechanism to, as you take off. So you'll come in, the ball go to your left hip, and you'll want to do that. And that's quite a good action because you are getting rotational forces out of that as you load the takeoff and then want to. So you're basically like coiling and then uncoiling, even with a rotational component to it. And you'll be trying to create space with your rib cage to lift your center of mass higher with the ball. So there's that feeling of like, oh, I can make myself taller by doing that. If you just come in and try and dunk the ball from here, you're like, da-da-da-da-da. You've got no gather. So again, if you want to get good at dunking, try dunking with a light med ball, or try dunking with the ball. If you actually, like, you could contrast that. So I do this with players. I do this with basketball. Contrast dunks. We can use a med ball, or we can just say,
Sean Evans.
Yeah. I'm like, you're not allowed to swing the ball for a couple of these reps. You just have to sit the ball here. And they fucking hate it.
Yeah,
Just drive the ball and then you can do that. That's all you got.
So the better you can sort of just collapse your whole body is the higher you'll get in extension. Therefore,
not collapse it, but you need some recoil to that tissue.
Yeah. You don't want to be the worst sneeze I've done since the Kassem interview, and I missed it. You said on the contrast thing, because I know what you're saying, where when I run in with the basketball, I'll swing it to almost create it's an extension of my arm swing. But in your contrast, you get them to hold the heavy med ball and hold it in a static position on the run in and take away the arm swing. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. So they only get like a little concentric lift. Yeah. You could honestly, most people don't need a med ball. You just do the ball. Like it's like sit it at your chest, and all you're allowed to do is take off and lift it and put it in the hoop if you can. Most people just say that was so bad. All I could manage is being able to just touch the net. So it's like, it just brings a constraint to what you're trying to do. And what it does for me is it tells me that I can overload the hips and the lower legs to a higher degree because there's a lot more of a need for those structures to work rather than stealing stuff from being able to swing this ball with your arms. And obviously,
it's not being like, you're shit because you're not rotating. It's more like use the leg.
Yeah. Assuming that you are highly coordinated with your arms and you've mastered that skill, is removing arm swing one of the most powerful ways to put a lower body emphasis on your plyo training?
Yeah, quite easily. Yeah, definitely. And
because I'm always hesitant. The only time when I'm teaching, because most of what I do is introducing people to plyos and building up those capacities, and so much of it, I'm never really taking away the arm swing because I always want them to have it to play with so they notice and so they can work on it. Other than I'll often contrast hands on the hips leaps with hands moving and do like crescendo, decrescendos. So again, they can just notice that contribution. But then, now for me and a couple of my other athletes, but I think like I don't have it down. A few of them do. Yeah, really, I don't play around with that much. How often would you say in total training volume, you're open to taking away the contribution of the arms in like a weekly microcycle? Like, would you ever do like a 50-50 split, or is that something that you find yourself commonly doing, or is that a lot of armless jumping now?
It would be like maximum 20% for me. It tends to be, it's the kind of 80-20 rule. Like you can, when things
keep the main thing.
Yeah. When it's serious, it's going to decrease significantly. And when it's not so serious and more general, then I can shift it to more like 20%. But yeah, ultimately what it is it's the same thing, but there's just a slight constraint to how it's being done. That's how I see it. That's my version of contrasting things. It isn't so far away from the thing. Like going back to what we said earlier, it's not so far away from the thing that it's not the thing anymore. There is still the skill element there. There is still organizing your body, but it's like, fuck, someone's taken my arm away in the middle of a tennis match. Do you know what I mean? Like, oh shit, I can only play with one hand now. But it's still tennis. So it's, that's That's what I love the
Finally
most about
talking to a coach who understands that there's more than one component to specificity.
Right? That's how I go about doing it. Like if there's anything that I wanted to pride myself with my high jumpers when I coached a lot more in high jump, is that my jumpers felt they could high jump in any way, shape, or form. So like we would do lots of constraint based things. We would run in with no arms. So I'd call them penguin jumps. So you're not allowed to use your arms when you high jump. Shit like that. But it would be like 5% of our jumps, 10% of our jumps when we did it. It's a bit of fun as well. But you can see people start to just understand what they've got to do with their lower legs and their hips. Because ultimately that's the thing that organizes us the best. And I think the David Weck, heavy rotational focus and like head over foot has really been destroyed by actually our main drivers of force, which come from our hips and how we then transduce that force into the floor with our ankles and our feet. So that's always been my mentorship from Eric and how I then want to push that. I want people that could walk with a tray of food and just run around a curve and fucking high jump. Do you know what I mean? Like that.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. Yeah.
You know, so
yeah.
And I don't want you to
trying to make a cake out of sprinkles.
Yeah, and I don't want you to be this frozen, upright, bolted, perfect runner. No, I want you to have flow and I want that to happen. But I don't want that to be the focus. I want that to be a prerequisite of what the movement is then. So it's coming from the movement. I'm not doing that to create the movement. So I'm not trying to get over my foot like this to create the movement. No, it's just going to fucking happen. So I need to just get the main movers to be as strong as possible so that it's really...
Yeah, it's like you don't need to do head over foot training to fix your locomotion. You just need to not do exclusively wide stance, partial range of motion, box squats for 20 years and tren and no sprinting and no jumping and then wondering why your head doesn't go over your foot when you run. It's just like, you haven't fucking been doing it for 30 years.
It's what I think the industry trends towards observational coaching. I see something, therefore I then have to coach it into the human because my human doesn't run as fast or jump as high as that human. And it's like...
force velocity profiling. It's like, I'll just fucking download Usain Bolt force velocity profile, try to match that. And then it's like, no, run 958 and then check your force velocity profile.
And I'm always... I find it really difficult when it comes to like, oh, this is how this guy did it, and therefore we're all now, we now have to figure out how we can do it the same. And I'm like, be different. And I fucking love that. Like high jump is the best sport for that. Because ultimately there's one rule and it's you have to take off of one leg. But other than that, it does not matter. So if you want to do something different, you want to orientate your body in a certain way, then go about doing it. It doesn't matter. You just need to get yourself over that bar. So yeah, it's that observational lens, I think, is destroying us. It's great. Obviously, people pick up some great things, but other people then take it to like, this is now how the training has got to be. So anyway.
Like all those videos where people are like drawing, oh, this is what the ankle's doing here and this is why you need to do. It's like, it's just getting into the nuance of it, I guess.
Squiggly line gang.
Yeah.
You know how Isaiah Riviera, friend of the show, elite dunker, that all the dunking guys, they talk about not bring back, but like, can we have a 2-footed high jump? Do you think, is Barshim still the king of high jump if they allow 2-foot jumping? Or do you think that the sport changes so dramatically? We're doing a lot of like theorizing here. And do you think we see more muscular strategies and the look of a high jumper changes? Or is it just... And do you think we would see this takeover of bilateral jumping, or do you think you would still see diversity if you could speculate?
Well, I mentioned this in this discussion. The only thing that's going to happen is that gymnasts are going to dominate the sport. They are going to round off backflip over, and they have already. They've already broken the world record for the high jump with round off backflips.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I
think they jumped over... It's either 250 or 260. And you're talking like one guy gave it a try, well, not one, but you know what I mean, like a group of guys.
Yeah, it's not like they tried for years and years, and like they would have been back to their gymnastics comp.
Yeah, so that's what potentially destroys it. So it's like, okay, let's ban.
It's not about the dunkers. They don't even see the big monster that's looming over them. It's the gymnast.
It's the gymnast. It's the 5'6" gymnast. So that ruins it. So let's say we get rid of you're not allowed to backflip. You're not allowed to round off backflip doing it. So Justin Darlington, his name's Just Fly, I think, on Instagram. He has jumped, I want to say close to 230 by running straight at the bar, 2 foot, and then doing a forward roll over the top of it. So he is definitely a good example of how the sport could go. And I do quite like, but I am such a purist, and I'm just like, you stick to what you want to do, boys. Like it does unfortunately potentially become a certain way. But you know what's quite funny is that I still think it would be based with faster, more like the elastic guys would still dominate, because Justin Darlington is a short penultimate. You can't do it. You can't be in deep knee flexion facing a bar. You have to be short penultimate, stiff-legged, pop over the top. Because as soon as you spend time, your momentum, your trajectory of momentum has to have some form of horizontal parabola. It can't be straight up like a volleyball player or a dunker, because you have to transition over the bar. So if I spend too much time bending my knees, what happens? I just blow through the thing and I just go straight into the bar rather than being able to stop, hit the apex at the top of the jump, and then tumble over it. So it's still a fast man's game, even on 2 feet, I think. So that's my 2 cents.
Is the horizontal portion of getting a higher jump and going over, is that mostly overrated, especially like in dunking, how people say it's a combination of the both? When you're talking about the low knee bend?
It's needed to clear a bar. You've got to think about how you have to orientate every morsel of your body over a bar. It's a lot easier just to lift your center of mass, but when you've got to get your shoulders, your hips, and your feet over that bar, it takes horizontal movement. You've got to shift it from one part of the bar to past the part of the bar. So it is massively important. You have to have over rotation in the high jump. That's why a lot of high jumpers don't do that well when they dunk.
Because they'd be just as likely to put their ass in the bucket as their hand. Exactly. So you have to change the way that you take off. So you either blow through the bar, you're too fast, and you're like, holy shit, I can't do any trick dunks because I'm so, like, I have that horizontal trajectory, and I'm not stopping on a dime and then going up. So that's why 2 foot jumping is dominant in dunking, because I can stop, go straight up, have a lot more airtime in front of the bucket rather than a lot of airtime past the bucket as well, like you see in single leg jumping. So it requires a lot of horizontal. If you actually looked at the distance of travel, the guys are probably still, from takeoff to landing in the pit, there's probably still 4 meters there, maybe even 5 in certain people. If you watch Bohdan Bondarenko, he jumped 243. The guy is falling out of the back of the high jump bed. Like, for him, sometimes he's landing his feet on the ground. So it says a lot. There's a lot. And again, you want to jump high, you need a lot of horizontal translation. That's just a big thing. It's really hard for us as humans to stop and go up. We like to get that forward translation. You watch a long jumper, and again, like, long jump still does require some height to what you're doing. So there has to be a balance of both. It can't just both. A little bit of a selfish question to cap off. So I feel like, I don't know if it was years of strength training or just my jump style and my natural athletic tendencies. Especially when I sprint, I feel like I really see it. And especially, and then again in locomotive plyos, I feel like my horizontal force production is, I don't want to say off the charts, it's really good. Sorry, it's a lot better than my vertical force production. Like, again, like, it shows up in so many different areas. I feel like I can run really fast into the hoop, but then I more want to keep running rather than redirecting it into vertical. I feel like I don't get this plane taking off transition when I transition from early acceleration into something that should resemble max velocity and things like that. I know that there is changes in like the vector emphasis, for example, between bounding and hopping. I am so much better at bounding than hopping, but then, and I know that there's a much more vertical emphasis, relatively speaking, on continuous jumping on one leg, hopping versus bounding where you're exchanging. But I think initially I put a lot of it down to the fact that just hopping is also just harder. It's not that it's a change relatively from more horizontal to more vertical. It's also like the limb velocity and all those other things that you're expressing as well. So I understand that hopping is one of the best things for that vertical force production emphasis, but being that I'm big Matt Watson Kool-Aid drinker, I haven't done much like depth jumping and a lot of the drop jumping, single effort sort of stuff. And despite the fact that I know good hopping has a vertical emphasis, it's not really constrained. Like you can just do it. And it's not shit to be very horizontal dominant in your hopping, because then you've got like speed hopping and sort of stuff like that. So with all that sort of being said, like, should I just be hammering like these single effort drop and depth jump? I know they're separate fucking things, but again, just for the you people listening, just for that vertical emphasis, that's a fun leg. Like, or is it just about me being more disciplined with my hopping and stuff like that, and really be like, no, can't like fucking fit more hops into a smaller space. Start counting hops per distance, and then I'll get that vertical emphasis. Sorry, rambling question, but help me, please.
Is your primary, like this question, is your primary emphasis on dunking, jumping high?
No. No,
it isn't.
No. So, and that's it. All of this vertical force production, I really want my outcome. I want to run faster, and I'm running. Okay. I'm doing that part.
Okay. So hopping for me definitely is, I would see hopping as a lot more like max velocity sprinting in terms of how we apply force when we hop. So it is a lot more vertically based force. So when we're at max velocity, a lot of our horizontal forces are decreasing in comparison to how much our vertical, like we're trying to maintain velocity in like upright sprint, right? It's just bum, 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 up and down. There's obviously horizontal components to it. It's never one or the other.
But the dominance is this vertical dominance.
Is going to be vertical. So hopping is a lot more like that, just with regards to the cyclical nature in which you hit the ground. So I think there's a big thing to be said in that. Bounding then is more of a swinging action, like an acceleratory based movement. So if you wanted bounding to be more vertical, like force wise and vector wise, then I would go bounds for speed, where it's more like max velocity sprinting again. It's like minimize how long you're spending on the ground, and it's doing it as fast as you can. So there's not much pull to the action. It's just boom, 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 boom. Or it kind of becomes a little sprinting like. Or it's bounding for height.
For my own personal clarity and the listeners, so speed bounding, would I just focus on bounding as fast as possible and getting my body moving as fast as possible? Or do I specifically think about getting off the ground as quick as possible?
So you would run into a flying zone. So it would be like you take like a 20 or 30 meter acceleration into a 10, 15, 20 meter speed bounding zone. And your goal is to bound and minimize the time on the ground. Okay, so it wants to be like bum, 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 but there's still a bounding swinging action to what you're doing, but it is really short and sharp. If it was for distance, you'd feel like the separation of your thighs a lot longer, and you have a lot more of a swinging action. Whereas you want it to be a little bit more like max velocity sprinting. So that's an option. Bounds for height is a great option. Honestly, if you want to get good as well, like vertical force emphasis, like here's also how I look at it. I think you are like that. It's either chicken or the egg. You either trained it with Olympic lifting or you're already suited towards it. That's why you're good at Olympic lifting. But I think your forward shin translation is where you like to produce force from. So when you drop your shin, you obviously like that feeling to drive through that. Whereas vertical force emphasis is not so
double
much.
knee bend.
Double
In
knee
weightlifting.
bend, exactly. I don't know. You could still say, well, if you want to go upwards with a counter movement jump, you're obviously going to transition your knees forward, but you're not then necessarily transitioning your center and whatever. Anyway, so
No, I know what you mean. It's again much more vertical emphasis. It's
could be
fast
some-
because again they never go away one of the directions, especially the vertical.
exactly. So I think there's something to be said. Definitely in. I like the idea of maybe adding in some one-off takeoffs. You could increase the need to create some stiffness there. I like the idea of doing some transitional momentum-based movements, like a flat into a high-based takeoff. So it could be, you could be doing things like flat hop, high hop, which is one of my favorites in terms of that's dealing with decelerating horizontal force and then creating it into vertical force. And the stiffness requirements for that are enormous because if you don't control it, then you just blow through it. So that's a big one for me. I think there's a lot to be said in that, which I really like with regards to a plyo. So you could do it in a leaping action, or you can do it in a hopping action. So yeah, flat to high. It's really nice. That translation of acceleration.
That makes a lot of sense because especially mimicking again, because I want to have that lifting off and that thing I could be even more specific than just vertical. Because again, specifically what I'm struggling with, that transition from horizontal into vertical and taking off like a fucking bird one day.
And then like if it relates to like jumping, like single leg takeoffs or 2-foot takeoffs, you have to mimic that as well. Like a lot of people get it twisted that my running vertical is going to go up if I do a lot of standing stuff. So if I do a lot of, let's say, counter movement jumps, or I do a lot of Olympic lifts bilaterally, it's going to make that translation to when I move to it off of 2 feet. And you're like, no, you need to do the work running in, stopping your momentum and going upwards, and changing those directions of momentum is where your money's made with regards to the skill and the tissue development side of it. So yeah, I think there's a really piss poor correlation with like a counter movement jump PR and let's say a single leg takeoff for height. I think Dick Fosbury jumped 2 meters 24 when he won the Olympics, and he had like a 23-inch vertical jump, like a standing 2.
Whoa. Wow.
So, but like, that says a lot. Like a 24 vert is not great, not for someone that is the Olympic high jump champion. But like, does it matter? Does it correlate? No, there is no correlation. So
the fact that doesn't correlate. I mean, my argument is
crazy.
A lot of things don't correlate, but
it doesn't correlate. It fucking does not correlate.
Just do the thing.
You want to know why? It's because I have had it with so many of my like young high jumpers, like 13, 14-year-olds that can jump close to 2 meters. They must weigh 130 pounds wet. Like they honestly weigh 50 kilos. Their counter movement jumps are terrible. But they jump close to 2 meters in the high jump. You're like, there is no correlation. Knee bend is like, and that's it. when they counter movement jump, it's like this gather and drop and two different things.
There's too much setup. It's too easy.
It's too much. So much happening beforehand. Yeah.
It goes back to the first question you gave me, Jacob. Just because you left the ground and it was a jump, everyone assumes that they're all the same, but they are so far different from each other.
Wow. Profound.
Yeah, it's like we've got strength training, but then it's just like you don't deadlift your bench up. That's probably too much of a distance, but you know, deadlift in a squat. It's like, there is some sort of, but need to be respecters around things. This was fucking fire. I hate to toot my own horn, but another extremely valuable podcast with an extraordinary guest.
I appreciate
that we missed just last week, Everett. Mate, you're an absolute legend. It's such a privilege to be able to reach out to the world leader in plyometric training and just grab an hour of his time. So yeah, thank you, Matt. I'm really grateful for this friendship.
That was awesome.
You know, I appreciate you, but
I appreciate you boys having me on. Yeah, you guys are the hardest working podcasters in this industry when it comes to, you are so freaking consistent with the way that you operate, and And I think that you've got a really cool team. And there are just very few people that can deliver a good opinion in not just like the performance. Like, there are so many people that want to get into like the nitty gritty bits of like a certain performance realm, but you guys have the ability to actually have genuine conversation about a lot of, widespread discussion. So I appreciate what you guys do. And yeah, it's awesome to be back on, mate. It's been a while since we caught up. So it's good to chat to you.
Let's can this recording so I can do the real catch up.
If you're sick of going goblin mode on the same 4 accessory exercises at the end of every single session, head to the notes below and grab our free gymnastics program. It'll change the way you think about accessories forever.